Welcome back to Rising. Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Let's get to it. So, House Democrats are staring down a familiar problem, and it's not just a procedural fight over funding the Department of Homeland Security. It's the deeper issue of what the party actually stands for right now, whether it has the backbone to defend it when things get uncomfortable. According to Axios, behind closed doors this weekend, Democrats were openly split over whether to support a 2-week DHS funding bill, a stopgap negotiated by Senate Democrats and the White House. Now, some lawmakers were a hard no. Others warned that letting the government shut down again would be politically disastrous. That tension matters because it's playing out in a moment when Democrats are already struggling to project strength, coherence, and direction. The emotional core of this fight is real. The fatal shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy have intensified anger toward DHS and ICE, especially among progressives who see another short-term funding extension as a Band-Aid over systemic problems. For many members, voting feels like abandoning reform altogether. But here's the problem. Democrats have been here before. When health care reform faltered, when shutdown brinkmanship backfired, when messaging fractured instead of focused, the result was not leverage, it was weakness. Now, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries tried to draw a line, telling Speaker Mike Johnson not to assume Democratic votes to fast-track the bill. Later, Jeffries made the case publicly, saying, quote, "We need a full and complete debate." He also warned Republicans against taking a, quote, "my way or the highway approach," which is a fair point and a reasonable one. But process arguments only go so far when the public is watching a party argue with itself over whether it can even agree on a temporary solution. Republicans, meanwhile, are playing their own risky game. Johnson has acknowledged the difficulty, saying, "We'll get this done by Tuesday, I'm convinced." He brushed off objections by adding, "I don't understand why anybody would have a problem with this, though." That confidence may be misplaced. His razor-thin majority leaves no margin for error. But Democrats don't get a pass just because Republicans are being messy. The question for Democrats is simple. What are you giving voters to hold on to heading into the midterms? Because "we oppose this internally" is not a governing message, and "we did not want the government to shut down," but is not a rallying cry. Here's where I land on this. Kicking the can down the road has not worked. It hasn't produced reform, it hasn't restored trust, and it hasn't stopped the same abuses from happening again. A 2-week extension does not buy leverage, it just buys time for the status quo to survive. And the bigger point is simple. Immigration enforcement can exist, but it cannot operate like a system with no rules, no transparency, and no accountability. Masks off, body cameras on, proper identification. Federal agents should be held to the same use of force standards as state and local law enforcement, and they should be held accountable when they violate them. That's not radical, that's basic governance. Local police departments operate under these rules every single day. So if Democrats are going to take a stand, this is the one that actually matters. Not a symbolic shutdown, not another short-term patch, but putting clear enforceable rules on paper and refusing to fund a system that operates in the shadows. Because accountability isn't anti-enforcement, it's pro-democracy. And if this moment doesn't force that conversation, then nothing about another temporary funding deal ever will.
Well, this is their moment to fight, I guess. I think the partial shutdown is going to end by Tuesday. It looks like House Democrats, at least some of them, maybe even, will vote for the resolution, which is to keep funding the government and then have a separate vote or to keep funding DHS, all that stuff at its current level, and then have a, argue about accountability measures, and then maybe put the billions of dollars of extra funding they got in the big, beautiful bill, which I oppose. I oppose the whole bill to begin with. I don't want more funding for anybody in the government. They've got plenty to work with. I'm defund the whole thing is what I say.
Are you
not
defund
just,
ICE?
I would defund the IRS and ICE.
But are you defund
and
ICE?
DHS
Oh, okay.
And DHS and the TSA and the Education Department.
TSA.
And I'm not done. The Commerce Department, Housing and Urban Development, all of that, they can all go. Defense Department can be cut in half. We can have a federal government with half the budget it currently has right now.
Okay. Well,
And we can privatize Social Security, and we'll cut big cuts to Medicare.
You just want to cut everything. So
Yes.
you're equal opportunity
Yes.
cutter. That's a lot of
Not
cutting.
planned.
I think that
The economy will thank me.
yeah, but
We will boom like never before.
we know that's not going to happen, right?
No, I
Elon Musk
know.
tried
I know.
his version of that,
I
and
know.
it didn't work.
I know.
But I think that when you have common
Well,
sense
Democrats
reform,
found one program they want to cut, ICE. So congratulations.
and some people, so there's different conversations happening within the Democratic Party. Some are the whole abolish ICE conversation. This is like defund the police. It's like that's the one end of the spectrum, and the other end is just common sense reforms. We heard Senator Chuck Schumer lay them out specifically in 3 tiers. Some of them, to me, seem like you can easily get on board with them. Having the same accountability as local law enforcement, not wearing masks, just being like accountable in these ways is, to me, not. It's not that
Well,
hard to justify adding these to a bill
Right.
before. And why can't you negotiate it now? Like, your job is actually to negotiate and put things forth that will become law. Like,
There should
negotiate
certainly
and talk
be
about it.
investigations of any of the ICE
Independent
agents or anyone-
investigations is what they're
yes.
calling for.
Yeah,
And why is that hard to agree with?
That it
Sure.
shouldn't be hard to. I agree with that.
Right, so it's frustrating
That
that
is frustrating.
Democrats have to say, "Oh, we'll talk about it in 2 weeks." We know how this goes. It's why Congress is constantly looked at as ineffective, because they kick things down the road, and then we're like, "Okay, we're still talking about this." It's why we're still talking about health care 10 years after Obamacare was instituted and trying to repeal it and move back
Obamacare
and
made
forth.
it worse.
Either way, here we are, still talking about it. No Republican plan laid out. Oh no, Trump did lay out that lousy plan that was just like a one-liner statement about what he plans to do for health care. That really even Republicans couldn't understand exactly how that was going to help. So this is another one of those issues. I think that Republicans win the argument about immigration when we look at borders and say, wow, this is chaotic. And we show that imagery and we talk about how Biden might have failed. Democrats surely will win this conversation when we see 5-year-olds get detained and when we see American citizens being killed, because nobody wanted that type of immigration reform. And so we're at a crossroads where if we don't implement and have dialogue across the aisle about how to have immigration reform, that we're not going to have it in any way that the country appreciates. And it's going to become a winning issue that was a winning issue for the Republicans will soon become a losing issue in the midterms, because now we have Americans killed and people that can't even get their story straight.
I guess we'll see. But Republicans, and I'm not thrilled with the way the administration has instinctively, in a knee-jerk fashion, defended these heavy-handed these things that have gone wrong. And then they said, well, domestic terrorists, it's fine. That doesn't sit right with me at all. I still think they can go to the well of saying, look, this is aggressive enforcement because local Democrats aren't working with us. They are not helping. They are not enforcing immigration at all. And so we sent in the feds, and it's messy and it's ugly, but the American people voted for us to do a significant campaign of deportation. Blue states, despite the election going for Trump, blue states are refusing to do the enforcement that we voted for as a nation, and so it's aggressive there. And that's ugly, but that's what happens when there's resistance to a federal mandate. Just as if they were coming in to desegregate the schools, as they did in the 50s and 60s. That's what's the action is being taken, and when there's local resistance, yes, it's not good, but you should get on board because that's what was voted for by the people of the nation.
So effective governance is pointing the finger who started this. That's what you're saying. Look at Democrats and say, well, you made a sanctuary city, so you... Here we are, though. And as we saw, like, the actions being taken by the federal government could have started with or began with, as I've been saying since the beginning, a conversation with the mayor. And no, who said that? Like, Walz called the president, and they had a conversation that they both reported was good and forward. Okay, but why couldn't that conversation happen?
Walz is beginning to buckle.
Why couldn't that conversation happen early? No, the president's beginning to buckle. They sent new leadership into Minnesota, and they pulled out some
right,
ICE
but if they had
agents.
not sent it, my point is, if we'd not send in the federal immigration authorities in the first place, then
Says
it would
you.
never
No,
have
I don't think that
negotiated.
aggression and bullying is the best way to lead a democracy. That's not what I agree with. I think that conversation is a great way to start, and you might disagree with local policies, but you can come to some sort of middle ground that represents what Americans voted for, which is to remove criminals out of cities across the country.
The segregated states in the civil rights who said, we're not going to let little black kids be at this school. Sorry. And so the federal government didn't say, okay, let's negotiate. They said, okay, then we're sending in the federal troops, and they will go to school, and that became the law of the land. They were not, Tim Walz and Jacob Fry were not going to enforce immigration law until the troops showed up at their doors.
Are you telling me that the federal enforcement that was trying to implement desegregating schools was throwing white Americans on the ground and killing them in the name of desegregation? Is that historically what happened? Is that what you're arguing? That
No,
the
I'm
same
saying
thing that happened
but it
with
took
ICE?
federal troops to enforce it because the local authorities.
But the argument is about the overuse of force and the aggressive protection of these ICE agents and how it's being implemented. Not that immigration enforcement shouldn't happen at all. At least my argument is that. And so that's the problem.
But Jacob
There's no
Fry's
oversight.
argument is that no.
I said Jacob Fry is childish multiple
Yeah.
times in our dialogue and with Amber and I. I think that his behavior in response to Trump is childish given what Walz, the governor, has done already.
Yeah.
They should try to figure out a common ground. Voters in Texas turned out for a small-time race over the weekend, but it could have big-time implications for the midterms. We'll tell you all about it. Stay with us.